So recently there's been a host of rumours swirling around the Classic fanbase that we are potentially in store for some fresh servers, around November to mark 20 years of WoW and over 5 years of Classic. And the demand for fresh servers, whether that be in Vanilla, BC or Wrath, is a pretty cyclical demand that always seems to churn up in Classic players at least a few times a year, as players yearn for that big reset that provides a solid boost in morale and shoots some excitement back into Classic WoW, providing an original blast from the past in part of nostalgia for what it was like starting the game fresh, but also providing some pretty helpful resets to the game in a general sense that can improve gameplay aspects in Classic. So let's take a look at why players seem to want fresh servers in Classic WoW. Now, like mentioned, these are just the rumours swirling around that something potentially is on the way for Classic, which I believe came about from Soda Popping delaying a certain event for his hardcore Classic guild till November, with the source being, "Trust me bro, it's the best time to wait till." And it's seemingly a coincidence that this would line up for WoW's 20th anniversary, and also mark over 5 years of Classic, where we tend to get some form of celebration. And whilst retail celebrations are very clear as to what's going on, there's not been any specific lined up events for Classic as of yet. And well, this could come in the form of fresh servers for hardcore, or an extension into Burning Crusade, as well as speculation that we're getting fresh Vanilla, BC or Wrath servers, but realistically who knows at this point. Yet, fresh demand always comes about for Classic players, and especially at a time when we're kind of committed to either Season of Discovery or Cataclysm, it makes sense to me. The original trilogy is typically what had the most demand when we saw Classic WoW reign supreme at the time when retail wasn't doing too great. And running through each expansion kind of did show that it wasn't just nostalgia baiting, as players did really enjoy these versions of the game and will happily return to them year after year. And such versions of the game help players set up a base where they want to live, in between experiencing what is the newest content in the game, whether that be in retail or Classic ventures, such as Season of Discovery or Cataclysm, or whilst knowing if the newest versions of the game aren't for them, they can happily return to their favoured long-term version of the game. Yet, we currently only have this for Vanilla, so it makes sense there is still a demand for some new fresh servers that could sustain either Burning Crusade or Wrath of the Lich King, allowing players to re-experience these if they missed them the first or second time around, as well as continue to progress at their own pace without the fear of the servers being closed or progressed onto the next expansion. However, this ties into the Era Realms debate, and well, there's a lot of arguments already why it's not a good idea in some ways. Yet, I still favour the return of these expansions, whether that be from a baseline fresh vanilla that progresses onto each expansion or a respective era realm for either one. Now, fresh servers also provide some pretty handy redevelopments for the current state of vanilla era, with fresh realms always coming with a host of excitement and returning on new players to repopulate these areas of the world which have just kind of been left to the dust. For example, a lot of lower level content and dungeons aren't being ran really at all, as everyone's either at 60 or going on their own little journey, or anyone who's leveling an alt is typically running through a fairly empty world. As a result, there's a host of group quests and dungeons that new players or returning players will miss out on. And whilst a patch on this could be to add something like Dungeon Finder can sit pretty awkward with some Classic players. So although not a long-term fix, fresh servers do provide a temporary boost for a few months or maybe even a year, so that players can either re-experience or experience for the first time a lot of the excellent lower level group quests and dungeons that vanilla has to offer, which sadly over time have become neglected. And unfortunately, it seems to be something you can't avoid unless you start adding in new systems to the game. For example, I think retail does a decent enough job of keeping older content relevant, such as using chromie time to level up new characters, or the time walking events which come every few weeks, allowing you to run old dungeons and old raids from the past expansions that actually provide up-to-date gear that can be used for current raids in the newest expansion. It's hard to see vanilla ever doing something similar to that, except for maybe adding Dungeon Finder. So for now, it's understandable that a lot of players only see the way for this to become true is again through fresh realms. Similar to the long-term issue of era realms making old content unplayable for a lot of players, is the issues that the economy starts to rear its head and you get a weird supply and demand that becomes true only with a dwindling player base. And fresh realms, once again, while not a long-term fix, will provide a new sense of sustainability or excitement when it comes to finding valuable items and trading throughout the world in a way that seems actually worthwhile, and getting to see how items progress as the whole player base progresses and pushes through new content as you head towards level 60 and obviously then go through raids is pretty interesting. For me, this is just a core part of MMORPGs in general, when it feels like there's actually some life being pumped through the world in a form of trading, where the auction house can be booming and huge parts of the game like professions actually feel worthwhile pursuing, such as mining ores for blacksmiths to craft gear that is relevant to lower level player bases. It's good fun and part of the progression of vanilla. However, sadly, still not a long-term fix unless the realm is due to progress onto the next expansion. Yet sometimes it's still a breath of fresh air that's needed, and you still need to understand you're going to enjoy something that's temporary as part of your journey, and that's one of the main appeals of Classic WoW in general. Finally, I think it's still worth noting how slow Classic WoW is from vanilla to Wrath, and how long it can actually be at times when you're grinding through those first 60 levels. And for a game that's turning 20 years old, there's still a lot to which players haven't actually done or got to experience in the original trilogy. When you come around thinking about the time it takes to sink into any decent race class combination to get to 60 or 80, gearing up, running dungeons, raiding, learning professions, and then doing it all again on a new alt. And fresh servers provide this new chance for players who maybe want to experience this from a different point of view. For example, I typically run plate wearing classes on Alliance, and I think if fresh came around I'd potentially go for maining a Warlock on Horde this time, as although I sometimes run Warlock, I've never mained it, and I've never got to experience that full vanilla journey when it's new and fresh, and you're at the forefront of content, waiting for new phases to be released from a mainly Horde point of view. And the main thing is that fresh will give players this option. I mean, if it just means you stick to what you love, go for it. But for a game that's aged, it's still surprising how many new routes or experiences you can take, or see things that you haven't done before. And probably that's why the game has remained so popular for 2 decades now, as there's so many options and ways to re-experience a game you love but in a different light. And whilst the option for this is still technically available in Classic era, and the familiarity that fresh servers would do paired with a bit of hype, is the kind of content that a lot of players, including myself, are craving at the moment. Until something more appealing like a Classic Plus comes along, there's still plenty of arguments against Fresh Realms, like the Classic WoW team's limited resources, how it might split the playbase even more, or if anyone will be bothered to yada 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 blah blah blah. But I think for a change it's worth seeing why players want Fresh, as well as some of the benefits that do come from it, as well as the fact that there's always going to be a demand for Fresh servers in any point of the original trilogy, seen most recently with the Fresh servers movement organised by players themselves in vanilla, or new ways to experience the game like Hardcore that then came to be hosted by Blizzard themselves. So will we get Fresh in November? Yeah, who knows what's in store. But at some point we have to get something new from the original trilogy of WoW, whether that be BC and Wrath era servers, some adjustments to Hardcore, or simply just fresh vanilla for a bit of hype. Well, be sure to let me know what you think about fresh servers, and if they serve any good to Classic WoW at this current moment, and are they likely? Yet, as always, take care out there, and I'll see you on the next one. Ta-ra for now.
As always, if you're new here, feel free to like and subscribe. And on that note, I think I'll say ta-ra for now, and I'll see you later.